My name is Killian Wawoe. I'm a psychologist by education, and I worked for ABN AMRO Bank. And after my studies, I wanted to work in the banking industry in human resources. And by coincidence, I ended up at ABN AMRO. And after a traineeship, I ended up in human resources as head of human resources for the European department, for Western Southern Europe, France, Italy, Spain, etc. I did my PhD on reward management and on performance management. And I have to say that when I started my PhD project back in 2003, it was a very innocent topic. You know, performance management, bonuses, banks was not a very important topic for the bank that time. Then the crisis came in 2008, and my bank went bankrupt, and the Dutch taxpayer had to pay 20 billion euro, or at least 30 billion, but probably 20 of them is going to be gone forever. And so the taxpayer had to pay my bank, had to bail out my bank for a lot of money. And that was the moment that I thought, research, so science is telling me that the way that we deal with bonuses and the way that we deal with performance management is actually wrong. So the academia says one, and the bank says something completely different. So what I would like to do today is share with you my experience from the banking industry. And normally many people from Western Europe and United States, they come to Ukraine or Russia and they tell them, please look how great we are and you should do exactly what we did. And here I am telling you, please don't make the mistakes that we made. Hundreds of banks went bankrupt in the US, UK, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The banking industry was completely upside down. So I'm here to tell you where I think that we went wrong. And to end on a positive note, I would like to share with you how I think things could be improved. Okay, currently I'm a professor at VU University in Amsterdam and Webster University St. Louis. And beside that, I'm a HR professional for banks in the emerging markets. Now, the only thing that I didn't explain to you is that I said that I'm Dutch, but as you can see, my name is not Dutch at all. And I have my name from my great-great-grandfather, like yourselves. But when we talk about performance management and performance improvement, let me tell you the story of my great-great-grandfather. And I know for sure that he never went to work for fun. And the reason why I know that is that my great-great-grandfather was a slave. Here you see my great-great-grandfather working. And in case you're afraid that I'm now going to be emotional about it, if you see the gentleman over there with the hat and the whip, that's my other great-great-grandfather because my mother is Dutch. And what you see here is a motivation or performance management system as we used to have it 200 years ago. So what you see here is my great-great-grandfather from father's side motivating my other great-great-grandfather. And the idea that they had 200 years ago is that if you want to have better performance, you just whip somebody and they'll do it. And I'm not going to say it's ethically right, but it worked quite well. So my great-great-grandfather, he got whipped and then he worked harder. But then all of a sudden, my other great-great-grandfather, the manager over there, he had a fantastic idea. And he thought, you know what? I'm going to give my people money to perform better. So he introduced a system in which people could make money, and then if they had a lot of money, they could buy themselves free. So my great-great-grandfather from Africa, he went to South America, he worked there, and he bought his own name back. As you probably noticed, all these football players from Brazil, all these famous singers from the United States, those are black people, but they have American or South American names. But only a few of them got enough money to buy themselves their name back. So that's why I have an African name, is because to a bonus program. I thank my name to a bonus program. Now, what I would like to say is that if you look at my great-great-grandfather who worked as a slave, doing simple work, who was not motivated, who had no money, in those days, the carrot and the stick, so motivating people by means of money or by means of punishment, worked very well. Again, I'm not saying it's ethically right, but it worked. Now the question is, does it work today in a banking environment where I worked? I was HR manager. Did it work to punish people when they do not work correct? And does it help to give an incentive, to give a bonus, to get better performance? Okay, that's what I'm going to tell you. But before I start, I just want to make sure that we have the same frame of reference. How did performance management used to work in my bank? On an organizational level, we had a strategy. We had certain goals, which means this year we're going to sell so many loans, so many credit, debit products, credit cards, etc. A long time I worked in private banking, so we looked at combined assets and liabilities. Okay, that's what we looked at. And then on an individual level, we got smart objectives. So you got to know at the beginning of the year what you were supposed to deliver at the end of the year. And the question is whether or not that system works. So reward money is a given based on certain targets. Now, I would like to show you the research angle to this type of management. Okay. So this is a very simple idea. You were supposed to sell 30 mortgages. You got 35, so you get a $1,000 bonus. You got less, you get nothing. That's the basic idea. Some banks have a more complex system in which you have the bank's performance, group performance, individual performance. But the idea is normally the same, as that you set targets at the beginning of the year and you stop at the end of the year. Now, first of all, is one of the things that I used to learn on, or that we know from the academia, is that one of the risks of this system is that it's very inflexible. And I would like to share with you something that is in my textbook. When I was 16 years old, I had to learn about the Soviet Union. And, it's hard to read. But besides, I don't read Russian. But what it says here is that if people stick to a planned economy, and some of you who are a bit older than, let's say, 35 might remember how that works, is that if you have a planned economy, the risk is that you have a planning which is incorrect. So if something happens during the year and the assumptions in the plan are not correct anymore, you might be completely wrong. And that's exactly what happened in my bank, is that we had targets at the beginning of the year, which is fine, but if something happened with the banking market in the meantime, there was no way you could adjust that system. So the first thing that I would like to share with you is, if you work with a similar planning, if you have a bonus system like this, please don't make it as rigid as we used to have it, which is that you were not supposed to change the plan during the year. And that's a big mistake. So the first thing that I would like to share with you is bonus is okay, but watch out with these very rigid performance management plans. That's one. Secondly, we know from research is that managers have the tendency to break banking up into very simple targets. So they look, for instance, at the number of mortgages, and that's it. It's management by Excel, a spreadsheet. Now, the risk if you work too much with these very rigid targets and also pay money for people when they achieve those targets, the risk is that your targets are too simple, but banking is something complex. So compare my world, the banking world, with my great-great-grandfather who was working on a field. His work was simple. The amount of kilos of sugar that he got or gotten during the day was indeed his performance. The number of mortgages that you sell is not necessarily reflecting your performance. And I will give you a couple of examples on that. So if you have such a system, it's fine, but please beware that banking is something complex, and it's not the way like my great-great-grandfather. Okay. In my PhD studies, I've asked 1,500 bankers to rate themselves according to the average banker. What percentage do you think of the bankers thought that they were better than average? 70%? 98? Oh, okay. Yeah? 100%? Okay. Well, the correct answer is that, and I'm going to show you some results for CIS bankers as well, because I did some research on that, but generally across the globe when it comes to bank, the most spectacular one I found was 96%. 1% of the people thought that they were less than average, about 3% thought that they were average, and 96% of the people thought that they were doing better than average. By the way, the men think that they're much more over average than the women. Okay. Why is this important? Because many people think that you can make your employees happy with money. And here you see the reason behind me why most people are not happy with their bonus. The reason is because they think they are brilliant. And if you think that you're better than your colleagues, then you think you should deserve a bigger bonus than your colleague. So I've worked in retail banking, where we had very small bonuses. I worked in private banking, where we had huge bonuses. And I've never seen people so unhappy as in private banking. Why? Because they thought they should get more than their colleagues. So lesson number 2 is, if you think that you can make your people happy with money, it's difficult. There might be good reasons to have a bonus program, but don't expect smiling faces when you pay out bonuses. Why? We tend to think that we're great. The third one is, lesson is called, I call this the Armstrong syndrome. I'm, by the way, the only user of this, so don't look it up on the internet. With this, I'm trying to say that if you measure performance in 12 months, there is a risk that something might happen after those 12 months, which in hindsight makes your performance different. And I always had difficulties in explaining this until Lance Armstrong came and helped me out. Why? He was the best cyclist ever from 2000 and 2007. And since 3 months, we know he was on doping. So the performance, in hindsight, changed. And in banking, the same can happen. You sell a mortgage in January, the customer is happy. 5 years later, he turns out that he got the wrong mortgage, and then in hindsight, he's unhappy with the bank and sues you. Some financial derivatives, which were designed in the end of the 80s, actually turned out to be toxic 15 or 16 years later. So a client satisfaction is in 12 months very difficult to measure, because the variable satisfaction may take you 30 years. And in performance management, we only look at 12 months, a 12 months window. So lesson number 2, please make sure that you have some kind of long-term vision in your performance management. Another lesson is called gaming. And gaming is when a banker gets a target and only focuses on the target and starts disregarding everything which is not in the target. So I've got here as an example somebody in a supermarket who's told that you should service as many clients as possible in an hour. What happens? She's going to see as many customers as possible in an hour. But the disadvantage is she might stop smiling. She might not help her colleagues. And if somebody drops on the floor, she's not going to do anything because her bonus is purely dependent on the target. And that is called gaming. Gaming means you're focused on your target, and those targets, as I just said, are often too simple. If you take gaming into the extreme, you get fraud. And unfortunately, when I was head of human resources for Europe, I had many fraud cases. And we often think on a low level that people start taking money, the cashier is taking money from the vault. That's fraud. But what happens much more is that on a higher level, people are gaming so much to make their target, to make this 5-year plan target, is that they start doing stuff which is contrary to the interest of the bank. And when I'm very honest, in my bank, when I was in a management team, we were, the last 3 months of the year, we were gaming the numbers in such a way that they were exactly according to the plan. So if possible, we should take costs. We should postpone them, get costs from next year, this year, ask the clients to wait, all these, and we all know that is happening. We all know the tricks, but if you take that to the extreme, you get fraud. And research shows that fraud comes from a combination of high targets and high bonuses. So in case you think that some people are just crooks, criminals, and other people are good bankers, I tell you it's not the case. I've seen very normal people start doing crazy things. Why? Because their manager said, you have to make your target. This year, you're going to sell 100 mortgages. So what did they want to do? They wanted to sell 100 mortgages. And when they were on 99, they just invented number 100. So again, performance management, all well. Bonus programs, no problem, as long as you never stop thinking and make sure that it's not too rigid and too quantitative focused. Um, the highest bonus I ever paid out in my life was 2.1 million euro. I didn't receive it, unfortunately. I gave the envelope to somebody. How do you think this individual reacted? Who knows? A sad face, she says. No, it was not a sad face. No, it was not disappointed. Surprised? He was not surprised. He was also not angry. This is crucial if you want to understand the psychology of bonuses in your bank. How does this guy react? It was a lot of money. Also for him, it was like 3 times his annual salary. What do you think? What do you think? How did he react? Cash the check. Yeah, he did. Yeah, of course, he cashed the check and went on his bank account. But how did he react? He had a question. What was his question? Why are you giving me this? Well, no. His question was, what did my neighbor get? What did my neighbor get? He wanted to compare himself with his peer group. The only thing is that people around you, when you get more money in your life, you grow with your peer group. So when you were all students, you probably didn't have a penny. Most students don't have money. But then you have your first job, so your social environment is that first job. You get your second job, etc. And many of you are now in managerial job in banks. So you just forget the fact that so many people around you or in the rest of the world are actually much poorer. Like you probably also don't know that you're much smarter than the average person in your country. Why? Because you compare yourself with other people, but those people grow with you. So for privacy reasons, I got 1 block away, but this is where he lived. So he lived over here, and he asked his neighbor, what do you think, 2.1 million euro, is that a lot of money? And the neighbor says no. So then he goes into the business class seat to his flight to New York, and he asks his people, do you think 2.1 is a lot? They say no. He goes to the Rotary or whatever, the Freemason, says, do you think it's a lot of money? No. So in his social environment, he thinks it's not the case. So what is the learning point here is that your employees, they don't compare themselves with the other people in your country. They compare themselves with their colleagues who tend to have a lot more money as well. And as a result, people are very difficult to make happy with money. So I call this the Beverly Hills syndrome. I'm the only one using this terminology, so don't look it up on the internet. But it means comparing yourself with peers, but peers grow with you. And I lived and worked in Monaco for quite a while. And I noticed that people, not without a joke, who have a $5 million yacht, think it's a small boat. And the reason is, in Monaco, $5 million yacht is indeed a very small yacht. So you compare yourself with others. So what are the lessons learned that I would like to give to you? Is managers prefer too simple targets. People overestimate their own performance. It's very difficult to measure performance in a 12-month window. Watch out that people don't start gaming, which means focusing on targets which are too simple, or even commit fraud in order to make those targets which were unrealistic in the first place. And the Beverly Hills syndrome, if you want to make people happy, don't forget that they don't compare themselves with people on the street, but people in their social environment, which tend to make the same amount of money as they do. And if I would ask you, and I'm going to show you some numbers on CIS bankers, but also in this region, if you ask people, are you happy with their salary? Most people say no. And if you want to understand the psychology behind it, this is the reason. Okay, so let me summarize on what went wrong before I go on how to do it right. Is that many managers have this idea of managing, which was 200 years old. If you want performance, you just hit your people or you give them money. And I'm saying here is that that's too simple, and that if you're managing your people, make sure that the way that you measure performance is as complex as your bank. That's basically what I'm saying. Back then it was simple, now it's very complex, so take that into account. Okay, on VU University and Webster, we work on a concept called healthy banking. And what we try to do is, if we go back in time, in 2005, when I was working at ABN AMRO Bank, what questions should we have asked in order to predict the crisis in our bank? Which is not the question, are you happy with your job? Because the answer was yes, everybody was committed, etc. But what Could people have said back then in 2005, this bank is going bankrupt? And we came to the conclusion is that many people can actually very well forecast when things go wrong or if things go right. So we did 10 years of research and asked ourselves what makes a bank healthy. So, for instance, do you have enough knowledge in your bank? Do people have enough skills? How do they work with compliance? Are they engaged enough? And normally you see surveys only based on engagement, and we try to cover everything else which makes a bank healthy. Okay, all in one, sir. I'm not going to show you the Georgian example, but unfortunately for me, and because I did a research in this region, there are like 5 alphabets. You know, that makes my job very difficult. So, but we made one survey in different languages, in English, in Georgian, in Ukrainian, Russian, Armenian, etc. Okay, let me give you some results. We contacted 12,000 bankers, few of them via internet, via LinkedIn. So my students went to approach people. I also have a couple of banks with which I work that also helped, and that gave me an idea of how people are thinking. About 5,000 people participated in all the countries that I just mentioned, from Moldova to Armenia and from Russia to Ukraine. And I would like to show you some results. They're same day fresh almost, but some results, and also a comparison between this region and the global financial services norm, which includes 150,000 bankers predominantly in Western Europe and the US. Okay, let me give you some results. What I noticed is that many employees in the regions in which you work are actually quite engaged. You know, the engagement level, do you like your job? Are you satisfied? Are you willing to help your colleagues, etc., is quite high. There are quite a few people thinking about leaving, and this is very close to my story, because when you see this, you might think that it's due to low salaries. The knowledge base, we're going to benchmark that in a second. Innovation is about 60%, which means that 60% of the people say, yes, my bank is innovative. So around 85% says, yes, we are engaged. Almost 30 people are more or less thinking about looking for a new job. Knowledge base is about 60%. About 50% or a bit more is happy with their salary. And then there's performance management. How do you think performance is managed in your bank? And the thing is, if you see this, you might think that low salaries are linked to the stay intention. So people leave for the reason of money. And I'm going to show you that it's not the case. Just let me compare your numbers with the global financial services norm. At this point in time, innovation is one of the biggest issues for bankers. So if you ask bankers, do you think your bank is innovating enough? They'll all say no. So in the Western world, that issue is much bigger than here. And I noticed that in Ukraine or Georgia, Armenia, it's like skipping a generation. Everybody goes to mobile banking, everybody goes into product development, actually much quicker than you probably know than in Western Europe, which is completely stagnating. So that's actually quite good. Engagement is quite high, so people are very motivated. And they're actually not, if you compare it with the rest of the world, not so much complaining about their salary. And the psychology behind that I just showed you. So probably salary is maybe, and that's the takeaway for today, salary, motivation, money is maybe not the biggest HR issue in your bank. That's what I think. What I do think is an issue is that a lot of people, especially young people, lack proper knowledge. And that's what they say themselves. They say, in my bank, the level of knowledge is not that it should be. And also performance management could be improved. And the biggest issue is, how do we deal with underperformance? So if people in your bank are not performing, are they left alone or are they supposed to leave? And lastly, quite a few people are thinking of leaving. And every manager, no, most of them that I talk with, they think that money and stay intention is completely linked. And I think in this case, that it's not your biggest issue. I think that many people are not leaving due to money, but that people are leaving because they lack the opportunity to grow and a manager that helps them to grow. So again, this is a research report will come out soon, but unfortunately this conference came so soon that but I did want to show you already some results. But the takeaway for me is, and I think that's the story, is that many issues in the bank, first of all, turned out to be the same. Whether I am in Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, the issues are very much more the same, and many of them are actually human resources related. I see, unlike what most managers think, is that most employees are actually quite motivated. That is not your biggest issue. But the need for proper management is there. So how do we make sure that talent can grow? But we're going to talk about talent management in a bit, and also about education. I think those things are more important, is the need for training and the need for management, good performance management. So if I conclude, it's not so much the will, the motivation of people, like in the days of my great-great-grandfather, who really needed to be motivated to do his job. It's a matter of skill. And if you would ask me what is the takeaway of this presentation today, if you are together again at your desk tomorrow or Monday, is please focus not so much on the question, are my people motivated to do their job, but more, are they capable of doing what they're supposed to do? And do we as management help them in order to increase their skills? I think that's much more important, which is a bridge a bit today on talent management, where Dennis is going to talk about, and also something about education. I think in terms of HR, that is much more important than the question, do they make enough money? Because that's an overestimated discussion. To finalize my presentation, I would like to show you a short video.
For many years, I have worked as the head of a personnel department of a bank. I have seen the rise and fall of the banking sector between the years 1999 and 2010. Besides my work, I have studied the effects of bonuses on the behavior of my colleagues in the Netherlands, Romania, Brazil, India, and the United States. In this video, I would like to share with you where I think we went wrong in the banking sector.
We're going to turn the bull loose.
In the 1980s, banks were given more and more freedom. After the previous crisis in the 1930s, that freedom was taken away from them. Here you see the former American President Ronald Reagan surrounded by bankers as he signs a bill to give more freedom to banks. If we could look in the heads of these bankers, what would we see? What makes them tick? A need for money? Nice cars? A new boat? A new house? Sex? The American psychologist David McElland researched what motivates managers. He concludes that people at the managerial level are driven by a need for power. We are still a bit like monkeys. Managers want to dominate others. When does a banker dominate his peers? The answer is when your bank is better and bigger than the neighboring bank. Performance is not absolute. It's a matter of competition. You don't want to be good, you want to be better than others. Leon Festiger was a psychologist who was the first to study social comparison.
It's very cool, baby, but that's nothing.
According to Festiger, humans live in herds and compare themselves with others in the group.
What do you think?
With a conceptualization of performance, we see the same. For a banker, performance means outperforming others.
I can't believe that Bryce prefers Van Patten's card to mine.
But wait, you ain't seen nothing yet.
At my bank, this is exactly what happened. Our bank was not supposed to perform well. We were supposed to outperform other banks. A kind of Champions League of 16 banks was defined. In 2000, we were number 16. It was the ambition of our CEO to be at the top in 5 years. How do you make sure that these ambitious targets are met? Here you see the targets that my business unit had to achieve in 12 months. A net income of 1.25 billion euro and 315 million euro profit. If we succeeded, there were significant bonuses to be made. If these targets were not met, we had a serious issue. There was one important rule. targets were not readjusted during the year. Where have we heard this before? 5-year plans, targets, no readjustment on the production planning? Like in the Soviet Union, my bank was managed according to the rules of a plan economy. The plan was cascaded to an individual level. Our collective labor agreement explicitly prohibited adjustments of the planning during the year. Stephen Kerr wrote a classic article called On the Folly of Rewarding for A While Hoping for B, in which he explains that often performance targets are not well designed. Managers define work performance too simplistically and focus too much on the quantity of work instead of quality. What do cyclists and bankers have in common? At the beginning of the millennium, both delivered an extraordinary performance. However, years later, both had to admit that in hindsight, their performance was lousy. The reward for performance was then already on their respective accounts. One of the disadvantages of time-limited planning is that performance in a complex world can change afterwards. The bonuses I received of the years 2000 to 2008 or after the bankruptcy of my bank, which cost billions of taxpayer money, in hindsight are not justifiable, like the money this cyclist made. Bonuses worked well for my great-great-grandmother. In those days, employees were not motivated and had simple work. More money led to more motivation, which led to more productivity in terms of quantity. In today's banking industry, however, it's not about more quantity, but more quality. In a meta-analysis in which Jenkins and colleagues analyzed more than 40 studies of other scientists, they found that there is no correlation between bonuses and the quality of work. They did find a significant relation between bonuses and quantity of work. Hence, that is what we got in the banking sector, more quantity. What can we conclude when we combine the article of Kerr that states that managers set simplistic quantitative targets with this research which states that bonuses led to more quantity but not quality of work? Well, that bonuses for simplistic targets makes employees focus on quantity of their work alone. This can lead to dangerous situations, like paying a pizza delivery boy extra for the speed of his delivery. Nassim Taleb added another perspective to the mistakes of banks in his bestseller, The Black Swan. He showed that in the banking sector, we are fooled by randomness. Taleb, who was once a trader on Wall Street, states that there are many factors that determine the results of banks that are not controlled by the bank. It's random. If you gamble right, you will receive a bonus. When you gamble wrong, somebody else pays the bill. Risk is good. Excessive risk-taking can have dramatic consequences, like in the case of Jerome Kervill, Nick Lesson, and Kweku Adelobi, who lost billions while placing wrong bets. Banks started to take more risk. Bankers were doing the same. I do a lot of research on how bankers, or ordinary people, act in a situation in which profit is for them and losses are for somebody else. The result is always more risk-taking.
I got a $100 check from my grandma, and my dad said I need to put it in the bank so it can grow over the years.
Well, that's fantastic.
Bank employees were taking more and more risk and started selling risky products in order to make their targets. Clients were vulnerable as they did not understand these products.
We can put that check in a money market mutual fund. Then we'll reinvest the earnings into foreign currency accounts with compounding interest, and it's gone.
What?
It's gone. It's all gone.
What's all gone?
The money in your account. It didn't do too well. It's gone.
What do you mean? I have $100.
Not anymore, you don't. Poof.
After having lost billions, taxpayers became angry at banks and wanted their money back.
Just take the bag, take it up there.
Absolutely not.
Fill it up. I got more bags. 10 billion probably won't fit in here. You can't help me get the money.
I can't help you get the money.
What we can conclude about the banking crisis: it started with giving too much freedom to banks, who were led by managers with a high need for power, and who defined performance as being bigger and better than their competitor. To achieve that, overambitious targets were set, and bonuses were rewarded for those who met their target. As a result, banks started selling risky products. When things went right, the bankers became richer. When things went wrong, the people became poorer. We cannot change human nature. Managers are motivated by a need for power. But we can force them to plan more realistically.
Ik zou beginnen met, als ik het opnieuw zou kunnen doen, met...
If I could turn back the clock, I would not impose these heavy targets.
Te formuleren. Dat is,
Back then it made sense, but it was unwise. We should not have done that. I should not have done that.
Dat hadden we niet moeten doen. Dat had ik niet moeten dragen.
Planning per se is not wrong, but change your plan when it's inaccurate.
Turn right.
Also, we have to stop thinking that we live in the time frame of the Industrial Revolution, when motivating employees was very important. Today, most employees are motivated. The problem is rather a lack of knowledge and skills. If you want to improve performance, stop focusing on motivation, but start thinking about ability. If you want to improve performance, don't waste your money on bonuses, but invest that money in training.